Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parajikacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parajikacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. And I guess I can say that the assembled devotees includes those who are on the internet. They're assembled. Thank you for attending. So, we're beginning a new chapter today, chapter 13. On this 22nd day of February 2023 in San Diego. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are beginning chapter 13 entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. Page 529 in most of your books. And we'll be chanting two verses. So when you chant, just chant one of them. Okay. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyam Evacha Etad Veditum Ichhami Jnanam Geyam Chakeshava Shri Bhagavan Vacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Chaitram Iti Abhidiyate Etad Yoveti Tam Prahu Chaitragya Iti Tad Vidaha. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichhami Jnanam Geyam Chakeshava Shri Bhagavan Vacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Chaitram Mityabhidiyate Etad Yoveti Tam Prahu Chaitragya iti tad vidaha. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichhami Jnanam Geyam Chakeshava Shri Bhagavan Vacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Chaitram Mityabhidiyate Etad Yoveti Tam Prahu Chaitragya iti tad vidaha. Page 529. 529. Okay, Ross, one verse. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva. Oh, she has the wrong book. A different book. It's beginning of chapter 13. Go ahead, brother. Start again. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichhami Jnanam Geyam Chakeshava. Manoram, you want to try? Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Antonella. Shri Vacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Chaitram Mityabhidiyate Etad Yoveti Tam Prahu Chaitagyam iti tad vidaha. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichhami Jnanam Geyam Chakeshava. Do Shri Bhagavan Vacha. No. We're doing one, there's two. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Chaitam Mityabhidiyate Etad Yoveti Tam Prahu Chaitragya iti tadvidaha. No? Okay. Anyone online? No. Okay. Arjuna Vacha, Arjuna said, Prakritim, nature, Purusham, the enjoyer, Cha, also, Eva, certainly, Chaitram, the field. Chaitragyam, the knower of the field, Eva, certainly, Cha, also, Etat, all this. Veditum, to understand, Ichhami, I wish. Jnanam, knowledge, Gyayam, the object of knowledge, Cha, also. Keshava, O Krishna. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, the personality of Godhead, said, Idam, this, Shariram, body, Kaunteya, O son of Kunti. Chaitram, the field, iti, thus, abhidiyate, is called. Etat, this, yaha, one who, veti, knows, tam, he, prahu, is called. Chaitragya, the knower of the field. Iti, thus, tadvidaha, by those who know this. Translation. Arjuna said, my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, this body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. Purport. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, Chaitra, the field, Chaitragya, its knower, and knowledge and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all these, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. This body is the field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification, and according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body, or field of activity. Therefore, the body is called Chaitra, or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Now, the person who should not identify himself with the body is called Chaitragya, the knower of the field. It is not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the body. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age, he undergoes so many changes of body, and yet is still one person remaining. Thus, there is a difference between the knower of the field of activities and the actual field of activities. A living conditioned soul can thus understand that he is different from the body. It is described in the beginning, Dehinosmin, that the living entity is within the body, and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and from youth to old age. And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. The owner is distinctly Chaitragya. Sometimes we think, I am happy, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. These are the bodily designations of the knower. But the knower is different from the body. Although we may use many articles, our clothes, etc., we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. I or you or anyone else who owns the body is called Chaitragya, the knower of the field of activities. And the body is called Chaitra, the field of activities itself. In the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the Supersoul in regard to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness, they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities, as the distressed, those in want of money, the inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes into contact with material nature and how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This also is explained. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sorry, temperature's dropping. I mean, I'm fine with the hat if you're okay. Okay, so this is I always found this chapter very fascinating, as they all are. So Arjuna is now, after hearing about devotional service, and devotional service is the highest method of understanding the Lord, and then at the end of the chapter we're given a wonderful catalog of qualities that we should develop and aspire for as devotees. Now there comes some more, if you will, analytical chapters describing the soul and the body and how the soul remains conditioned in the body. I'm thinking specifically of text 20, I think, is Purushak Pakatisto hi bhunkte pakati jangunam, which is one of my favorite verses. How the living entity, who's a Purusha in the sense that he's trying to be an enjoyer in the conditioned state, so he's called the Purusha, although by nature we're Prakriti, right? We're the superior energy to the Lord. This is the inferior energy, the material energy. So by nature we're Prakriti. Krishna is the supreme Purusha, the Parama Purusha. And it's the idea in the verse that I quoted is that it's our own will and our own activities that determine our destiny. That's a very important point. And what that verse says, the Purushak Pakatisto hi bhunkte pakati janganan, that the living entity acting as an enjoyer in this material world is relating to the three modes of nature. He's experiencing the results of how we relate to the material energy under the guidance of the different modes of nature. Bhunkte prakriti jangunan, karanangura sangasa. Karana should be a very familiar word. It means cause. Right? Krishna is sarva karana karanam. He's the cause of all causes. So the cause, karanam guna sangosya, is the sangha, our association with those modes, determines sadasad yoni janmasu. Good or bad births. In other words, whether we go up, to the devas or even back to Godhead, or we go down to the cats and dogs or some other species. That's all dependent on how we relate to this material energy under the modes of nature. So that will be coming up later. But now Arjuna asks these 6 questions. He wants to know, what is Prakriti, nature? What is the Purusha, the enjoyer? In this case, it is 2 enjoyers. We are the individual Purusha, or person, and then there's the Parama Purusha, who's the Supersoul. That'll also be mentioned in this chapter. And the field is the body, and the knower of the field, the individual soul. And what is knowledge, and what's the goal? What's the object of knowledge? All of these are very important questions, and Krishna will answer them systematically. So the first paragraph here is to define the soul and the body. The kshetra, this is like a field that we act on, we relate to the larger field of the outside world through this individual field composed of senses. How do we know there is a world out there? Well, through the eyes, through the ears, through all of the other senses, right? And through our brain, we hear and we understand things beyond our senses. But it's all how the soul is interacting with this field, our original body, and then it's how it perceives the larger field of this world. So that's the first answer. The soul is the knower of the field, and the body itself is the field. So that's the first verse here, and Prabhupada expands on that. Prabhupada references that very well-known verse, Dehinosmin yada dehe, that even in this one body, we're transmigrating. Our body's constantly changing. We may not notice it day to day, but after some time, you can see it's changed. Definitely changing. So that change is going on, but we're the same person. So therefore we're not the body. We are the knower of the body. We know of these changes. And let's face it, we are in deep ignorance about most of the things that are going on in our body. Right? Who really knows how many hairs are on our head? How does the blood circulate? All these things are mysterious. The doctors are still discovering so many details, the intricacies of the brain and so many things. So that's all the field that's been given to us after so many years of coming through the species. And as it's worth repeating every time, it's a special gift, the human form, because you can understand all these things and then act in such a way that you can finally, after all these births and deaths, get free of the limitations of the material energy. We don't need a material body. So that's basically this first verse. If you have any questions or comments. Oh, Natalie, hold on. We've got the mic right behind you.
Yeah, I thought this verse is really interesting because before we started, we were talking about, like, being a woman and how it says, like...
Being a what?
A woman.
Oh, okay.
And how, like, there's no... right now, like, they're discussing if women can be, like, initiated as gurus.
It can serve as initiating gurus. Yes, go ahead.
And so, like... But, like, this kind of makes... Because sometimes I feel like because I am a woman, it is a limitation. But, like, in a little bit of this, what I have been learning, I was feeling like the spirituality has, like, both sides. And this verse kind of makes me feel like it doesn't really matter.
This is an ongoing question. There have been lady gurus in our sampradaya. I don't know if you know that. Did you know that Nityananda's wife, Janava, was the guru for the whole sampradaya after Lord Chaitanya disappeared and everything? Mm-hmm. She was ordering the six Goswamis, let's get going with the book distribution. It was on her order that they piled all the books that they'd written, the Nectar of Devotion, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the six Sandarbhas, in a big case, and they put it on the back of a bullock cart. And they take it down from Vrindavan, which if you go to Vrindavan today, it's kind of very built up. Even like a few decades ago, it was quite rural, But in the day, 500 years ago, it was really the outback, Mm-hmm. And so they were writing them down, but they weren't being printed or copied. There was one of each. So they needed to be taken to Navadvip, down in Mayapur, near Calcutta, present-day Kolkata, where a lot of scholars were, and they could start getting them copied. So that eventually took place. There was a whole adventure. They were stolen and recovered. Can you imagine? All the books that we read and rely on, if they were actually lost at that point, we wouldn't be sitting here. But by Srinivasacharya's efforts, I won't tell the whole story, he got it back. So anyway, to make a long story short, the head of the whole sampradaya was recognized as Janava Devi. And there was also Gangamata Goswamini. She was an initiating guru and she was a Goswamini. She was a ascetic. Now it's rare, but it's there. And in Prabhupada's movement, women have played a very key role. There's a beautiful biography of Yamuna Devi. I highly recommend it. It's 2 thick volumes. A lot of it, it's not an autobiography, although a lot of it, she wrote some things. But she was key in getting this movement established in England. She was with 5 other devotees. She had her husband and 3 couples. And I went to, after she left her body, I don't know, it's been a dozen years, I went up to LA for the memorial, And Sarmasunda was there. He was one of the 6 devotees who pioneered Krishna consciousness in the UK. And he said when they got there, they didn't really have a place to live. They hadn't really any contacts, But they were able to settle a little bit. But it was Yamuna who got everybody up in the morning and preaching and making sure everyone was chanting their rounds and everything. She was the leader. And Prabhupada trained her in devotion, in deity worship. And she was in charge of the standards of the deity worship in the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan. So there's many wonderful ladies, some married, some not, Yamuna was married at first, but then her husband took sannyas and everything. But she tremendous in enlivening the song we sing. You've been here. Have you ever been here at 7:15 when we greet the deities? Sometimes in the morning. once or twice? Anyway, there's a song that we sing. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Forgive me for my... But Prabhupada loved that. When he first heard it, his tears are coming down. He was sitting on the Vyasa-san. She's singing the lead. And because of her and because of the efforts of Shyama-Sundar, they were able to contact George Harrison. You've heard of him, right? Yeah. And he said, let's make it 45. It became number one, almost one on the charts. Hundreds of thousands were sold. It popularized the Hare Krishna mantra. So I'm just trying to impress on you that Prabhupada was perfectly willing to engage ladies in very significant services in his movement. And so we should recognize that. And so, are you a living entity? Okay, so then you're eligible to chant Hare Krishna. And if you chant Hare Krishna, you can also go back to Godhead and beyond the limitations of all of this. So this is actually Prabhupada's movement. Now it's also true that there's some statements, but I'm telling you, there are other statements. There's one in the Adi Leela where Prabhupada says, some of my godbrothers or some people in India criticizing me for having Brahmacharini ashram, which is not done in India. You know, we don't have one. We used to have one here, but maybe we'll again. But many temples you'll find, you know, where you have single ladies who are practicing just like the men. They're also going out and distributing books, you know. Mother Jessica's distributing books. You probably distributed some books. Manoram, you distributed books. I have distributed. Yes, even I distributed books. A few. Anyway. It is troublesome sometimes to realize that, you know, the limitation but they're ultimately very superficial, and it doesn't mean, you know, we should just, you know, wherever we are, and if we're inspired, we should chant, we should take it seriously and practice, and we'll advance in devotional service and get the mercy. Okay. Okay, Arjuna.
So Hare Krishna. I'm a little confused about the knower. You said the knower is the soul. Shouldn't be the knower shouldn't be the intellect, because, like, say, this is my body, it's my field, and I'm the one observing, and it's kind of more my intellect knowing.
The intellect is not alive. The intellect is a very fine material element. Intelligence, we call it, buddhi.
Right.
Yeah, the buddhi and manas. The manas and the buddhi work very close together. The mind is kind of more, you know, working through the senses. Sometimes the mind is called the sixth sense. And judgment, you know, this is something, you know, this is pleasurable, let's go after this is painful, you know. The intelligence is the special thing we have as a human being, highly developed.
It's the one that...
Yes, he's got the reins, you've seen. But the soul is even above the intelligence. The soul is the living spark. Now when we die, when the gross body dies, the subtle body remains, and that includes the intelligence, the mind, and the most fine was the ego, the sense of self. And within those three, the soul transmigrates to the next body. And it hires, you know, authorities who are conscious of that, and your perfect body is just ready for you. But the intellect doesn't know anything of itself. It is like a very fine tool through which the self contemplates various things, and also reasons, the idea of reason. Yes, my mind and senses are telling me do this, a little bit of pleasure, but I know from reading Bhagavad Gita that if I do that, I'll ultimately suffer. And so the intelligence say, no, don't do that. And animals don't have that. It's much more rudimentary. It's much more like instinct. You know, the dog is not going to say, well, I don't know, I don't think the steak is there, but it's not good for me. I think I'm going to become a vegetarian. No. The dog, you know, is programmed to eat meat, and if it's attractive, it'll eat it. It's not going to think, you know, even 10 minutes ahead. It's acting on moment to moment, generally. But human beings can do that, and that's the intelligence. But intelligence is also a very fine tool. It's like a microscope or something is helping you to see. Shall we go on? Text 3. Chetragyang chapi mam vidhi sarva chetreshu bharata chetra chetragayor jnanam yatra jnanam matang mama. Okay, so he's going through Osayana Bharata. Now you'll find this word, it's kind of an unusual word. Sayan means descendant. Osayana Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Purport, while discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find 3 different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are 2 souls, the individual soul and the supersoul. Because the supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the super knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma or the supersoul. One who studies the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely in terms of this Bhagavad Gita can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, quote, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body, close quote. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not in knowledge of other bodies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as the Supersoul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the various species of life. A citizen may know everything about his patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the supreme proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of the senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesha, which means, well, that's a mistake. Huh? I certainly do. I think we should tell the editor to fix that. Which means the controller of the senses. Rishikesh means the control of the senses. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all the activities of the state. The citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord says, I am also the knower. This means that he is the super knower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In the Mahabharata Shanti Parva 339.6, it is stated as follows: Chaitani hi sharirani bijang chapi shubhashubhe tani veti sayogatma tatak chetra gya uchyate. This body is called the Chetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the knower of activities, and the supreme knower of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the supersoul is known in terms of Vedic literature as jnana. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the supersoul as one yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. This material world, which is the field of activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of nature is the living entity, and above them both is the supreme control of the personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 112, Bhokta bhogyam preritaram cha mutva sarvam proktam trivadham brahmam etat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the Jiva, or individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller. In this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly, I am also the knower of the field of activity. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not a knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies, and there are different owners of the bodies. Because each individual soul has his individual capacity for lording it over material nature, there are different bodies. But the Supreme also is present in them as the controller. The word cha is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan. Krishna is the Supersoul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that real knowledge is to know that the Supersoul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. So one thing to know about the Supersoul is that he's giving us good instruction. He's, telling us to do this, and inspiring us to do the right thing. But often we're not hearing, we're not obeying, and we don't want to hear. And so Krishna consciousness, to a large degree, is turning up the volume of that of the Supersoul is telling us, and learning how to take good instruction. And Lord Chaitanya says in his instruction to Sanatana Goswami that the Supersoul speaks to us through the spiritual master and through the Shastra. The Bhagavad Gita here, that we're hearing these words of Krishna, right? Sri Bhagavan Vacha. So this is the same Supersoul speaking to us, right off the page. We can't understand the Sanskrit, so Prabhupada has nicely, his representative, the Guru, has nicely translated them, so we can understand and explain. So that is a great advantage of one who is intelligent enough to hear, to pay attention to these higher instructions. Otherwise, the instructions are still being given, but we got a blockage. We can't hear it. The voice of conscience is that, faint thing. If you keep disobeying your conscience, still doing evil, after a while you don't hear it anymore. You're not going to feel guilty for doing bad things. I deserve so many things. We have so many examples of demons in Krishna Lila, in the Bhagavatam in general. And the last thing they want to do, the last thing they want to hear, is the instruction of God. They're all trying to be God, and that was Hiranyakashipu's flaw, right? He didn't want to hear it. His son kept telling him, no, you should. The first thing he told him, you should surrender to God. Tat sadhu manneya sodabharya dehinam sadasam budvigna diyama sadgrahat hip vatmapatam griyamandakupam vanam gatoya dharmashriyet. He said, his father asked, what did you learn today? What's the best thing you learned? He had no idea that he was a devotee at that point. He thought he would get a nice answer. Well, I learned this Machiavellian technique, divide and conquer. No. He says, he didn't even, then Prabhupada makes a point of playing. He didn't even call him father. He called him Asuravarya, or best of the demons, Okay. Oh, best of the demons. The best thing I heard, sadhu manya. Now we should know that the word sadhu often means a sadhu, a saint. But it can also mean just very good, or bravo. So here it says the best. The best thing I learned, sadhu manya, in my opinion, oh, best of the demons. Best for whom? Asuravarya dehinam. For the dehinam means the embodied soul. We're all dehis. If we go back to God, we're not dehis anymore because we don't have a material body, you see. Dehi and jiva are kind of synonyms. So for all embodied souls, I've learned the best thing for all of them. And then he describes the situation of these dehis in the material world. Sadasamudvigna dhyam means that their intelligence, their mind is always disturbed. sada samudvigna. Udvigna means disturbance. Why are they disturbed? Why are they always disturbed? Asadgrahat. Because they're holding on to the impermanent as if it was the salvation. You know, we're taking shelter. We got the impermanent bodies, we got our impermanent homes, impermanent money. That's certainly impermanent, right? It comes and goes. Everything is impermanent, but we're eternal. And therefore there's that anxiety. Even you're taking shelter, you're trying to get, you know, a place of security and happiness here, but the time factor is always pushing you toward destruction. You're going to be separated from it. I just heard Prabhupada give a lecture. I'm listening to him speak on the Prahlad's prayers, and he came to a verse that is one of my favorites, which I kind of had forgotten for a while. But this verse completely encapsulates the material condition. So he's praying to Nrsingadev now. He says, Yasmat priyapi yaviyoga sayoga janma shokagnina sakala shudahyamana dukaushadam tadapi dukkamatadhyaham bhuman vamami vadame tapadasya yogam. So what he's saying there is, Yasmat priyapi yaviyoga sayoga janma shokagnina. Shokagnina means the fire of lamentation. So he's describing himself. He's a Mahajan. He's already in the highest levels of Prema Bhakti. But like they often do, like the songs of Vishwanath Chakravarti or Baladev, they describe themselves as conditioned souls. So it's Yasmat Priya Priya Yoga Sayoga. So we have things that are Priya, that are dear to us. Primarily our own body, but then extensions, family, loved ones, dogs, money, whatever it may be. You get attached. And these things, okay, they give you comfort. But those things which are dear, beginning with the body, are eventually ripped away from you. This is a cause of great lamentation and pain. And on the other side, those things which are abhorrent to you are forced upon you. This is what Priya Priya Viyoga Sayoga, and this gives birth to Shokagnina, to the fire of lamentation in the material world. Right? Shokagnina, Sakala Yonashuddai, and it's not just in human species, but it says in all kinds of species. Sakala Yonashuddai Hyamana, I've been burning in this fire of lamentation caused by these basic two things. So in the human form of life, we're very intelligent, so we come up with all kinds of ways of negating these factors that cause us lamentation. These are called duk aushadhi. Aushadhi literally means remedy, like a medical remedy, herbal remedy. It can be any kind of remedy. Insurance. Whoever invented insurance, you know, whoa, I was in such anxiety about having a car accident, but now I'm covered. You know, if someone hits me or I hit someone, we're good. No more lamentation, right? So that fire insurance, life insurance, this insurance, that insurance, all in order to bank the fires of anxiety. Doesn't actually work, but anyway, it's an illusion. So that's a dukkha aushadam. That's a remedy for the dukkha. But then he says that just causes more dukkha. Even the insurance, you know, you got to pay the premiums. Then something happens, and you find, oh my God, I'm not covered for that, right? Like, you know, I have the minimum insurance for car insurance. I don't have any kind of collision insurance. That's risky, right? If someone hits me and runs, you know, luckily I can park off the street. That's a big thing, you know. But just a minimum, because I hardly drive, you know, 10 miles a month. 10 miles a month. I go to the Vons. If they don't have it, I go to Sprouts. And if they don't have it, I go to Trader Joe's. It's all within 1 mile. So what kind of insurance do I need? Well, I need insurance to get registration to drive the car, so it's minimal, you know. But but all kinds of things that we come up with to send off the material energy, but it produces worse, you know, more misery. Where does global warming come from? All of this carbon dioxide burning the fuels, the petroleum, and so. But you know, that solved the problem. We can get, you know, to where we want to go much faster in great comfort. You know, so I was driving the cars and the trucks. You know, but now the backside is tadapi dukkam. The dukkha aushadhi, the remedy, become more dukkha. So then the last line, he gives the solution. Dukkha dukkam atadhyaham, and then that's the source of the whole problem. Atadhyaham. There's different ways of understanding this phrase. But I think Prabhupada understands it. Atadhyaham, because I'm thinking I'm something I'm not. Atta diyaham. Diya means the intelligence. I'm thinking of this body. So all my solutions, happiness and trying to ward off the stress is in relation to the body, which the body is not me, and it's always disintegrating. So now, what's the solution? He prays to the great Lord, Bhuman, O Lord Nrsingadev. Bhamami, this soul wandering in this material world. Bhamami, Bhuman Bhamami Vadame Tabadasya Yogam. Please instruct me in your Dasya Yoga, which is synonymous for Bhakti Yoga. Please just engage me in your service. So that's the solution, is to turn our mind and our efforts toward reestablishing and cultivating and reestablishing our devotion with the relation with Krishna. And to get out of this material world, the world of duality. In the spiritual world, there's no lamentation. That's the name of the world, Vaikuntha, where there's no anxiety. So that all of that is coming from the Supersoul. It's coming from Krishna, right in the words. He's speaking the words here, and his pure devotee is also channeling and giving it. And when you read here, he's quoting from the Mahabharata Shanti Parva, and all kinds of quotes from other shastras, which are simply amplifying, explaining Krishna's own words. That's the Supersoul speaking to us. And that's the importance of this book, because it's given by a devotee. It's as it is. It can actually have the potency. So that the Supersoul, we can't really contact him unless we approach his external manifestation as the books and as the person, this Guru Sadhu Shastra. So that's an important understanding here. Yes, please.
I've already spoken, so somebody else has a question.
Okay. I think.
I also have a question, but you can go first. No, you go first.
All right, Hare Krishna. So you were talking about how the Supersoul comes from outside as the guru, and then from inside, and also we read the books, and that makes it more clear. I wonder if you could speak more about how this, because sometimes I think that all I've got is the Supersoul inside, because there's certain questions, especially things that have to do with material life, or it's my spiritual master that I'm aspiring for, he's even said if you have a question about this thing, don't ask me because I don't know. I'm a sannyasi. I just don't know. Find someone else but I just feel like when it comes to, having an outside job and trying to find the way through a career and whatever, trying to act in devotionally when there might not be a devotee to ask about. And so he's kind of I have to rely on the Supersoul. I wonder if you could speak more about how to know when you're listening to the Supersoul and when you're listening to just your own mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me see if I can consult with the Supersoul. Maybe. It is a puzzle, because when the movement started, you had the 22nd Avenue, and gradually you had the other places and in those early days, there wasn't much of a congregation. If you were going to be a Hare Krishna, then you moved in, to a temple, and that included ladies and men. And but gradually, as the movement developed, there were many more people living, in the movement who live outside of the individual buildings. And these are householders who practice at home, and they set up make their home as much of a temple as possible, and like that. But there's always a tension, because generally, when you have a job, you have to deal with people who aren't devotees, and so you can't just say, why didn't you chant Hare Krishna, Prabhu? It doesn't work that way. So you have to kind of be able to use the material energy in a way that helps your devotional service by getting you nicely settled so that you can be regulated, like that. So it is a puzzle. And frankly, since I have never had to deal with that, I've been I've always been on the inside. I'm not really the person to answer all the intricacies of how to deal with the material energy in such a way that it doesn't contaminate you. This is the difficulty, and I think it's kind of you build up your muscles, even things like compassion. If you actually take the trouble to try to distribute books and help people, then you're acting in such a way that you can see, this person is being helped, and they actually came to the temple, or they wrote me, so it's working. And that enlivenment, that makes you more eager to do it again because you're pleasing Krishna so much, and that's, So in the same way, those who've had to deal with the material energy and still be Krishna conscious and contribute, those are the people you want to consult with. Someone like some of the households, like Dharma Setu, Babu. Of course, he's got special. I was at a ceremony with him. We had I don't know if you remember this devotee Darshan who comes on Sundays all the time, and during Kartik he's here every day, just like you were here every day. You remember the Indian gentleman who comes? And on the weekend he brings his family. So he's been doing that for years. So he invited me to come to a ceremony. His young boy, he's 10 years old, is getting Brahmin initiation. This was the invitation. And entering the Brahmacharya ashram. This is how the invitation was written. I said, really? He didn't say how old he was there, but when I came, he said, this is a young kid. He's like 8 years old. He wasn't going anywhere. But it was this whole thing. It was a 2.5-hour ceremony. It was fascinating because Dharma had done so many of them. He's very expert, So he invited me and Balaram to come from the temple. So we were sitting there. We had his neighbors there, also watching. But it was, I realized that, this engagement, and I know in Tucson there's a devotee who does it also, does all kinds of sacrifices for the ladies, for the Indians. So that's a special. A few can do that, obviously. But if you have to work in the karmi world, you have to be able to maintain your consciousness even when you're not able to directly speak about Krishna, or you have to hear other things. How to navigate that and still stay enlivened and still be able to preach and be enlivened in your devotional service, that requires to consult with someone who's actually doing that. I can't really from this side. But it's always the same dynamic, though, is that Supersoul is always there. He's also with the people who you're dealing with. And, of course, there's so many accounts where someone can, find someone in like an office situation who is also receptive to Krishna consciousness, like that, So it's a puzzle, but we have to try to make the effort as far as possible. Oh, no, Rama.
If there's time, if there's not, I can't say.
Well, there's time. There's time.
Thanks. I had a question about pure devotees like Prahlad Maharaj or Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Srila Prabhupada, and how you were speaking about they're pure devotees, but they come from this place of being the lowest, and I'm really curious about how and why they have that level of consciousness. And if you're a pure devotee, how do you feel so low and far away from Krishna when they're the closest? And
yeah, it's not that it's not. I think there's a little bit of a mistake there. It's not that they're coming from that place. They feel that, even though they're the most exalted. Prabhupada would himself give the example of Krishna's Kaviraj, where you're reading along, and suddenly he starts describing himself, and I'm lower than the worms on the street, and anyone who utters my name, I'm worse than Jagai Madai. Anyone who utters my name loses all his piety, And this is Krishna's Kaviraj. But then we're warned in the purports, this is his humble position. He's not really like that. But the greatest devotees actually feel, neglected and unworthy. And what that is kind of what that sets up is their sense of helplessness and dependence on the Lord, so that they can cry out from the depths of their being, because this is how they actually feel. That like there's a verse, Madhavendra Puri's famous verse. Now this is Radharani speaking this, I Dina Dayardhanata He Matadanata Kadaba Lokise. Dina means the most wretched, like Dina Bandhu. Krishna is the friend of the poor. So Radharani herself, and Madhavendra Puri is also uttering this, Lord Chaitanya, is saying, you're now in Mathura and you've left us alone, and we're bereft. But Aidina Dayada, your heart is melting for those who are most wretched, and I'm the most wretched because you're gone now. Nate Matoda Nata Kadabara. When shall I see you again? Due to my not seeing you, my heart is breaking. You know, what should I do now? So this is reflected in so many songs you'll find, you know, because it's how they actually feel, because that's the most intense mood, is to feel separate from the Lord, neglected, and be absolutely bereft, and just to call out from the bottom of your heart with the deepest emotion. And then Krishna reciprocates, you know, just like Lord Chaitanya in the Antya Leela. He's in that mood, he's wandering in the Jagannath Vallabha gardens, which are connected to the Jagannath temple. They pull flowers there and they offer to deities, you know, there's a lot of land involved. But these gardens are there, and Ramananda Roy wrote this play, Jagannath Vallabha Nataka. And it's based on Lord Chaitanya's activities in that garden. And so there's you know, where are you, Krishna? Where is my Krishna? And then he sees Krishna, you know. And for a second there, he sees Krishna playing the flute, and he goes, and then he disappears again. So this is the paradox of how love and separation is the highest ecstasy, even though it seems to be the greatest agony. And the great devotees, they want to feel like that, and so they cultivate that sense of helplessness and wretchedness and neglectfulness, so that then, you know, they can call on the Lord and feel that, you know, tension. It's a very esoteric thing, but that's why you know, what is this? They're, you know, describing themselves so wretchedly. You know. Now we are out of time. Okay. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Yeah, that, you know, Yuga Ektam Nameshen, every moment drags on like a million years, you know. And
I was curious, like, if it was this, it also is some sort of leela to help guide us to have this mood.
yeah, well, that's why, you know, Trinadapi Sunichena. We should also feel very, very low and humble, and as Prabhupada said, the Hare Krishna mantra is a prayer from the heart. Please engage me in your service. Please engage me in your service. You know. Sorry.